Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. Hopefully everybody doing good. I want to welcome my new subscribers. Thank you for joining us. And I really appreciate those that take time out in their day to watch the videos. I want to touch base on something I can't recall if I've done one on it or not. Is a hospital stay. I'm going to go back in time and tell you about the experience I had about a hospital stay which pertains to Grace. She had to have surgery. This goes back to the year 2014. Well, Grace was very excited. This was in January of 2014, 1st of January. I was having my morning coffee and she comes out to join me with all these smiles and everything. Very excited. And she tell me she's pregnant. I was happy. But I know that's something she really desired. So I told her, I said, the first thing we need to do is get you checked out and get you a doctor so that you can have routine checks throughout your pregnancy. So we, I think it's the next day, if I remember correctly, we went to San Carlos. We was living in Calatrava at the time, about 15 minutes away. And we went to find her a doctor, and we found one, Dr. Grace. Get that, Grace and Grace? And she was a middle-aged lady, already had raised a family, and she's well-trained. She informed us, she just had returned from the U.S. for her updates and so forth. So I felt pretty confident with her. Well, she examined Grace, and she had actually found a cyst on her ovaries. Well, naturally, Grace and I were very concerned. She says, now we're going to continue checking this, but the best option is surgery, but we can't do that now. She said Grace was going to have to be at least 4 months alone before we would attempt any surgery. And of course we had a lot of questions about the baby and so forth. And she said that it shouldn't be a problem, shouldn't affect the baby whatsoever. So, we had, as you're well aware of, been concerned for the next 3 months, a little over. We was all tense, Grace constantly getting her examinations once a month. She was doing great, but we was informed that the cyst was actually growing. It was getting larger. And she said, don't be concerned. That when Grace gets far enough along, we'll perform surgery. Well, when the time come for surgery, we was informed that there's some things necessary that we need to do. Now this is the part that's different. We had to obtain IVs from the local pharmacies. Uh, Needless to say, the hospital pharmacy didn't have everything we need. We had to get everything that was required for the surgery at the pharmacies. Mm. Even the IV solutions, all that. And we had to get blood. Well, we found a donor, which we had to pay. Most Filipinos are O positive, so it wasn't hard to find. So we got the blood donor, and we got the blood. We got all that stuff in line. Then we got the surgery scheduled. So we, I think a week later, something like that, a few days later, we got Grace admitted for the day of her surgery. Well, I had to go out and find other supplies. Now, being new to the area, new to San Carlos, instead of me driving around personally, I got a tricycle to drive me around to get the meds that she wanted on hand. Now, they got a tendency to write a prescription for a name brand med. I don't recall the name of the med that she wanted. But the pharmacy there at the hospital didn't have it. So it was up to me to go to the city of San Carlos, all the pharmacies, to find the meds. So I hired me a tricycle and we go to a pharmacy. They didn't have it. We went to several other pharmacies. And then I asked, where would I have to possibly find this med? And they said, San Doc. San Doc. So I told the tricycle driver to take me to San Doc. Well, he's taking me back to the hospital. Then it dawned on me, San Doctor's Hospital. They didn't have it. So I had to go and talk to the doctor. I said, this is nowhere to be found. Oh, she said, well, that's no problem. Said, you can get the generic form. So she writes another prescription for generic. And they had it right there at the hospital. So I'll go down and get the meds and so forth. And then she says, now before we perform surgery, you need to go get a pound of blood. And you need to go to the public hospital to get it. So I hop a tricycle again. I go to the public hospital and I ask where I get this, and I go to their lab and I requested a pound of blood with the paperwork I had. And they asked me if I had a cooler and ice. No. Well, I thought they were the one going to transport it. Come to find out, I was the one who had to take the blood to the hospital. And I was required to have a cooler with ice. So I had to go out and buy a cooler, which here they're very expensive. Because they wouldn't allow me to use one of the styrofoam coolers. It had to be one of those, it had to be a hard case. And find ice. And so I found a place I could buy ice. And I went back and obtained the pound of blood. And I transported it back to the hospital and turned it over to them. That's not the end of the story. It was time for surgery, and I was in the waiting area. Like most confirmed spouses, I walked the floor waiting. Finally, they come out and tell me Grace is fine. She had no problem. She went through the surgery, no problem. I said, good. They said, now you need to take the cyst down to the lab, and so we can check, make sure it's not cancerous. It's not positive. I said, okay. They said, well, you've got to get a container. And it's got to be glass. I said, okay. So I'll go out and downstairs and go out to San Carlos, hop another tricycle. And I'll go to the local mall and I'll go back in there department where they sell dishes and so forth. And I was looking for a glass container. Well, I get a container about the size of this cup because I figured it's being a cyst, it wouldn't be very big. I figured it'd be about like this, maybe. So I go back with my container, all smiles and everything. I'll go upstairs and I set the container and slide it through the window, and the nurse at the window looked at me and says, I said, what's wrong? She said, well, it's not big enough. I said, well, how big this got to be? Well, she comes out and she sets it on where I could view it. I'm not kidding you. I was shocked. It was as big as my fist. It was this size. My God. So I go back out and I find a glass container, which was hard because they just, finding a glass container of that size in San Carlos, you don't see it. Anyway, I went through all the shelves and everything, and finally there was a glass container hidden. I dug it out. It was about like this. And it had a rubber sealed top. It was expensive. I think 1,100 pesos for that particular container, but I had no choice. No place else to get it. So I took that container, paid for it and everything, took it back to the hospital. And they put that cyst inside that container, and as I was carrying it downstairs, I was inspecting it. And I noticed it was nice, bright and red. There wasn't no dark spots in it or anything, so I felt pretty comfortable that it would come back benign. And the next day, we got the results, and it was benign. And Grace is still recovering from the surgery. Naturally, anytime you have surgery, you're worn out and you're sore and all that stuff. And the doctor come in and said the baby is doing just fine, no problems, no issues. So that was a relief. And Grace was in the hospital total, I think, 3 or 4 days, something like that. Now, not the end of the story. It's time for checkout. Grace gets her release papers and everything. Now, in the meantime, I failed to tell you, At that time, I had both my feet had boils on them, and I was miserable walking. So, and trying to keep those clean and from getting further infections. No, I kept them the peroxide and iodine and so forth, and wrapped, and 2 pair of socks, because I didn't want to get any further infection. But I was miserable, very miserable. And upon checkout, we had PhilHealth. I was shocked how much it covered and how much it paid. The total hospital bill at that time, if I remember correctly, was like 137,000 pesos, which was not that bad considering, that was a little over about $2,500 at that time, maybe a little more, something like that, probably close to 3,000. And PhilHealth paid a large chunk of that. I was shocked, because I was thinking PhilHealth would only cover maybe 20%. But I ended up paying about 17,000 pesos in addition to PhilHealth, which is roughly, at that time, almost $400. Of course, we'd already spent in meds and supplies about the same amount. But I considered myself lucky at that time. That was reasonable. And the results was great. Everything went smoothly. So that might be something, you might want to consider now if you come to the Philippines. You got to remember that a hospital stay, in most places, you're going to have somebody to help you. Someone that's going to go out and get all the meds and all the running and the footwork. The reason I say that, I've run across a few people that come here to live. They're like me. They're coming of age. But they don't want nothing to do with the partner or anything like that. They just want to be left alone. And that concerns me. Now, what if they get in the hospital? Who's going to do all this running and also have access to money to pay and everything? Because if you're in a hospital and you got control of your money and nobody else does, you might have a problem. Because these hospitals, especially the private ones, they won't release you without full payment. That might be shocking to you, but they can actually hold you, and that adds to the bill. So you might want to consider, when you plan on living here, you better have a good friend or someone that you trust in case you have an emergency. Anything could happen. You could be involved in an accident or whatever. And you will need assistance. Now, these hospitals, when it comes to money, ain't nothing else matters. Now, that's just the bare bones and facts. So, you'd be required to pay a deposit up front, and you have a daily billing, Make sure you don't go over your deposit. And it's got to be paid, or all measure everything stops. No, I've experienced a hospital stay personally. And Grace did all this for me. Now, my stay wasn't as severe as hers, or as expensive. I had dengue, if you want to know what it was, and I think I spent 3 or 4 days in the hospital, something like that. I could have stayed at home, to be honest with you, and done the same thing, because basically all they done was monitor me and an IV to keep me from dehydrating. Because from my understanding, there's no real treatment for dengue. But anyway, I just wanted to give people an overview, give you an idea of what to expect if you have a health issue or anything to do here in the Philippines when it comes to going to the hospital. It can be a nightmare if you're not prepared. Maybe this will help someone. Maybe it won't. Who knows? But I appreciate everybody taking time out to listen to my little story. And everybody take care. Good luck. And again, thank you for taking time out and visiting my channel.